based on the applications in the ACI, the fabric, the tenants, and then in each case, it's going to try and generate some dynamic maps to be useful to us. What does the underlay look like? What does the overlay look like? Things like that. So it can be incredibly powerful if you, for anybody administering, in this case, say a Cisco ACI environment. And it'll do this for a lot of other techs that we support as well. Next, we want to update our dynamic maps that are associated with sites, device groups, contexts. Again, that goes back to the network pane. And then public maps, which are just saved in the public folder. Now, when we say update maps, a little bit of context. Let's say I create a dynamic map of an area of my network, and I save that dynamic map, and I don't touch that map again for 6 months. During that 6-month time frame, the particular area of the network it was looking at, the topology changes substantially. So when I open up that dynamic map 6 months later, not having touched it, what is it going to look like? Is it going to show the new topology or the old topology? The answer is it's going to show the old topology by default because it's for reference back to what was happening at the time that the map was being created and so forth. So usually that's a good thing. But if we have maps that we refer back to over and over and over and over again, we want to keep them up to date. And so that's what this function is for, things like site maps and device group maps. So we not only need to say, yes, update site maps, we need to say which ones. And if we select this, if we want to say all of them, the easiest way to do that is to just select my network, which is the root, and then make sure the child option is enabled here. And that's going to have the effect of telling it to regenerate all of our site maps. We can create Visio copies of anything that we're updating and either have it go to an internal folder within NetBrain or a valid share drive. We can also keep a single backup copy of each map that we're updating. And then next, if we have app assurance, we can tell it to calculate certain saved paths. And you can even have it, you need to enable it, and you can have it alert people if there's a problem with any of these, things like that. Do we want to run DVT parser tasks or QApp tasks immediately after the system benchmark? So I believe they'll be executed sequentially. And this is a great way if we've got multiple things we want to run in conjunction with our system benchmark. We don't have to fiddle around with trying to guess runtimes and match schedules and so forth. We could just have their scheduling completely be triggered by this system benchmark, which is great. And finally, do we want it to email us if there's any issues? So there's that. Again, don't worry about plugins. So any questions about anything we've talked about up to this point, folks, in terms of class and these task types? Okay. So next, DVT parser task. What this task consists of is a frequency, of course, and then a range of devices. By default, it's everything in the environment. And then a specific list of data view templates, parser files, or both. And when we select a data view template, what we're really saying is we're selecting all of the parser files that were that contribute to this data view template's data, or we're selecting individual parser files. And then these selected parsers, when this goes off, the selected parsers will be run against all of the devices in the scope that they're qualified for. So if your parsers are tagged as they're supposed to be, and if you join me for NetBrain 201 tomorrow or every other Thursday, you'll see exactly what I mean by that. It's only going to try and run these parsers on devices they can actually work on. And if it works, it will pull not only the raw data to be stored of the show command or whatever, but it will also break it apart into individual variables and track their value. to build a history. So when you use a data view template and you have a data view and you click on a particular data point and see the history, as we saw, at least we should have seen yesterday. Now that I think about it, I'm not sure if I remember to show you guys that. But anyway, um, when we do that, this is a big place where that comes from. That and whenever it's actually pulled by our normal activity. So think of it as snapshotting parser data. Now, by default, only 32 total individual parser files are going to run on each device, but let's say we select 3 different data view templates that are all, at least in part, based on the same parser file. That parser file is only going to try to run once against each device. And of course, we can adjust this value up to 5,000 in terms of the maximum number of parsers. So if you want to make sure that all of your parser files are run against all your devices on a regular basis, because remember, it's OS specific basically in terms of what it's going to execute where. That's not as bonkers an idea as it sounds. And so if in that case, I would definitely juice up the number of parsers that are enabled per device to make sure that you get everything. So there's that. And then scheduling QApps, there's a number of reasons why we might want to schedule a QApp to execute. If we've created custom fields in the NetBrain database, we would then specify a custom QApp to pull the data we want to put in from wherever, and then to put it into those database fields. So this is actually an output capability of a QApp. And so scheduling that to run on a regular basis is essentially snapshotting data from wherever, just like a system benchmark task, and putting it into the selected fields in the database. So that can be definitely something to do. This is also how we generate what are called static data views, which are data. We set up a QApp to pull data and create a data view. And then when we create a static data view, it's just going to be available as a static set of values until it's updated by running the QApp task again. And this is a nice way to have static sets of values that the users can access in the data view tab on as needed. There's a number of other things we can use QApps for as well in terms of scheduling. We will have all different output options depending on how the QApp is configured to be able to put output. And finally, platform validation. There's only one of these tasks that is pre-programmed in. You enable it or disable it, and then you set its schedule, and that's the only thing you can really do with it in terms of configuration. It does what it does, and what it's doing is it's checking a lot of different stuff in the platform to see if there's any errors that show up in terms of communicating with devices and so forth. So that is our scheduled tasks. Any questions about anything we've discussed up to this point, ladies and gentlemen? All right. So once again, proper operation of a NetBrain deployment depends on regular maintenance. This is not a set it and forget it platform. I cannot emphasize that enough. You need to give this thing regular TLC or it's not going to work when you need it the most. It's just that's the way it goes. Because remember, what NetBrain is doing is incredibly complex. So we want to perform maintenance at realistically a minimum of once a week, ideally every workday. And so what are we going to be looking at? So to cover stuff that we've already seen at the system level, we go to my system management level. I'll want to check the service monitor to make sure that all of my NetBrain servers, however many or however few, that all my servers and services are working. So you should make sure everything's connected. All your services are green, that none of these things are way too high, things like that. Next, what you want to do is you want to check the task manager to make sure that there's no currently running tasks that have been running for way too long. And if you do see one that's been running for longer than you think it should, it'll tell you who initiated it. Check with them to make sure that it's not supposed to be running, because sometimes you'll want to have something run periodically over a longer period of time from from whatever reason. And but a lot of times it's possible that you might get something that gets stuck. It's rare, but it happens. In which case, just kill it. And then the task, I mean. And then system update to make sure that it was to check for update that the last time you checked, it's that everything's going okay. All right. And then for the updating the platform, you can see what's the latest available version. And here you can initiate update right from here. But just like with update